My name is Ethan Quinn. At 11:46 p.m., I got a text from my brother, just married your wife. You're a disgrace. That's how it started. No warning, no shame, just a sentence that shattered everything I thought was real. Lena emptied our account. Jason used my name to borrow money. My mother called it a misunderstanding, and while they celebrated in Vegas, I stood in the ashes of my life. But I didn't break. I got quiet. I hired a lawyer, froze every asset, dug through every document, email, call log. I found the fake applications, the hidden account in Lena's name, the stolen equity in Jason's startup listed under mine. He used my name to scam investors. She pretended to be pregnant just to stall me. They lied, again and again. So I let the truth speak. I filed with the IRS, sent proof to the SEC. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. And when he lost everything, when she disappeared, when their names were no longer trusted by anyone, I sat on a beach in Oregon, opened his last letter that said, "You win." Then I burned it. Some stories don't end in revenge, they end in clarity. I woke up at 11:46 p.m. The room was dark except for the soft blue glow of my phone screen blinking beside the bed. My head ached slightly, probably from the scotch I had after dinner, but that wasn't what jolted me upright. It was the message. Just married your wife. You're a disgrace. Jason. My hands froze midair. My breath caught. For a second, the words didn't register. My brain refused to process them. Jason. My brother. My only sibling. Lena. I sat there in silence, the glow of the screen lighting up the edges of my jaw, the creases around my eyes. My pulse throbbed in my ears. A dog barked somewhere down the street in the quiet Chicago night. I blinked and read it again. Same words, same gut punch. Just married your wife. I should have thrown the phone across the room, shattered it, cursed, screamed. But I didn't. Instead, I let it sit there on my lap like some ancient curse delivered to the wrong time. And I let the silence hold me. Then the memories came. Our wedding, October 2019. A cool fall afternoon at Lake Geneva. Lena in a backless ivory dress, laughing, smiling, promising new beginnings. Her voice had trembled as she said the vows. I thought it was nerves, maybe it was guilt, and before that, the storm I tried to forget. 2017, the first betrayal, her affair with Mark Jennings, a smug associate from the firm where she interned. I found out through a forwarded email thread, one of those damn lucky moments when the universe decides to kick you with clarity. She had begged, cried, swore it was a mistake, said it had only been once. That she had been lonely, that I was distant, all the standard excuses wrapped in tears and mascara, but I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. I forgave her. I told myself people make mistakes, that love meant fighting through the ugliest parts, that redemption was real. She quit the internship. She went to therapy. We traveled. I rebuilt trust like a fool stacking glass on a trembling shelf. Now I see it had already started cracking then. Back in the present, I turned off the phone screen. I didn't want to look at his name or those words anymore. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the fridge downstairs, the wind pressing against the old windows. My breath had slowed, but something inside me had shifted. I stood up, crossed the cold wooden floor, and pulled open the top drawer of my desk. Inside was a thin leather notebook. It was old, the edges frayed, but the pages were clean. I clicked a pen. My handwriting looked steady, colder than usual. Plan. The first word I wrote. Then 1, legal options, consult Thomas. 2, financial ties, audit all shared accounts. 3, communication, full shutdown. 4, damage control, social professional. 5, leverage, collect. I paused. Underneath, I scribbled one more line. This time, no forgiveness. I closed the book and stared out the window. The streetlights painted soft amber shadows on the snow outside. A couple walked by laughing under their scarves. A normal night in a normal neighborhood. But for me, the war had just begun. I didn't know if Jason had really married her. I didn't know if Lena had willingly gone along or if this was some cruel game. But I knew one thing with a certainty I hadn't felt in years. I was done being the quiet one, the good one, the forgiving one. From this night forward, I would take back everything they thought they stole, starting with myself. I lingered in the quiet once the match burned out in the sink. Every flicker of the remaining flame felt like all the moments I tried to ignore. The next move was mine, and yet I found myself frozen, trapped in the shade of what came before. I needed airspace. I left the house, stepping into the early morning chill of my suburban Chicago street. The world was waking up, exchanging laughter and dogs barking, completely unaware of how I'd been betrayed twice by the people I trusted most. In 2017, everything began to unravel. I'll never forget that evening. I returned from a late work trip to Minneapolis, drained but content at the thought of seeing Lena. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and garlic bread on the stove. She sat across the room, legs folded beneath her eyes, flicking up with that familiar half-smile. "Hey, you're home early." I froze. I wasn't supposed to be home till later. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up. It was an anonymous forwarded email from Brad, someone from my firm, who worked closely with Lena. That's odd, I thought. And then I read. The subject line had simply read her name. Inside were screenshots, messages, receipts, hotel addresses, meeting invites, late-night plans exchanged between her and that guy she'd been friendly with. Mark Hastings. My heart pounded, but not because of fear. It was anger at the betrayal, at the casualness of it, the thoughtlessness. I kept reading until I couldn't breathe. Lena turned around just then. Her smile slipped the second her eyes hit my hand holding the phone. She dropped the lasagna spatula. "What's wrong, Ethan?" I didn't speak. She froze. Then she walked forward and dropped to her knees, tears pooling in her eyes like spilled ink. She whispered apologies, excuses about loneliness, pressure, that it was only once. She said she still loved me. I wanted to believe her, and I did. I forgave her. We moved through the worst months together then. We started therapy. We had that restorative getaway to Asheville that summer. She deleted Mark's texts and never spoke about him again. She cried into my shirt at night. I held on, hoping whatever line she crossed was still recoercible. We married 2 years later, small ceremony at a lakeside resort outside Milwaukee. About 20 people, easy breeze music floating off the water. She wore off-white and I wore blue. She cried again during her vows, and I told myself it was emotion, nothing else. I wanted to trust again. But I never deleted the evidence. Screenshots of messages, the itinerary, the hotel billing. I saved them, tucked them away, not as ammunition, I told myself, but as a reminder. Trust is earned. It is never permanent. That morning I walked back inside and let the cold wash over me. I poured coffee. Black. My hands trembled as I stared into it. I didn't reach for my phone. I saw I had missed 2 calls from my father. I hadn't called him yet, not this morning. I pressed redial. His tired timbre answered on the second ring. "Ethan," he said, not a question. "I'm guessing you're awake too." I stayed silent for a moment. "Hey, are you okay?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah," he said. "Tough night." "How did you know?" He hesitated. "I can always tell. I just worry about you." I swallowed. "I'm hitting a wall, Dad." I heard him sigh. "You don't owe me explanations. Just please don't shut me out." I wanted to tell him everything, but the words were stuck. That was the Quinn way. Keep it in. Be strong. So I stayed silent. I'll catch you later, Dad. Thanks. After I hung up, I just stared at my phone. Dad always had a way of noticing things without me having to say them. That's love, I thought. The kind that sees without needing to hear. I dressed. I felt hollow. But something solid had settled inside me like concrete at last set. I grabbed the notebook again and wrote 2 words, Father first. I folded the paper and tucked it into the pocket of my briefcase next to the drive with everything I never deleted. That's who I was doing this for. I stepped outside again and inhaled deeply. The world kept spinning, and so would I. Rain had started to fall sometime between the bank and my drive home, soaking the windshield and making the streetlights smear like oil on water. I didn't turn on the radio. Silence helped me think. More than that, it helped me feel. I was raw and the quiet let the sharpness cut through. My fingers hovered over the phone screen. The name Dad blinked at me like it knew something I didn't. My thumb hesitated, then pressed call. 3 rings. Ethan. His voice came through warm and soft. It hadn't changed in decades. Still had that scratch near the end of each sentence like gravel under rubber. Yeah, it's me. There was a pause. You all right? You sound off. I swallowed. Just wanted to check in, see how you were holding up. He chuckled, but it sounded forced. That's usually my line. Another pause. You know, your mother was just talking about you yesterday. Said it's been too long since you came up to Duluth. I bet she did. My voice carried more weight than I meant. I shifted in my seat, watching the rain streak down the passenger window. Jason's been around though, huh? Oh yeah. He was here last week. Took me golfing. Brought steaks. Said he might bring someone special next time. My jaw clenched. I see. He sighed, and I could hear something else behind it. A question he hadn't yet asked. Son, what's going on? I leaned my head against the headrest, fingers tightening around the wheel. Nothing I can't handle. He was quiet for a while. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You always say that. Ever since you were little. You didn't cry when you fell, didn't complain when we missed birthdays. But I can hear it now. I didn't answer. Your brother, he's always been the shiny one, huh? My breath caught slightly. He had the charm, the smile, the quick wins. I did the work, the background. He went to USC. I stayed in Minnesota. He took risks. I built things slowly. And I think somewhere along the line, Mom decided who the real Quinn was. Your mother always wanted one of you to be famous, Dad said gently. Not steady. Famous. You think I'm being dramatic? No. I think you're finally seeing what you already knew. The words struck like a nail driven with precision. It wasn't new information. It was validation. Thanks, I said after a beat. For what? For not asking too many questions. He let out a long breath. I've seen the cracks in this family long before now. I just didn't think they'd reach you. They reached me. Deep. Before he could say more, I added, I'll be in touch soon. Just needed to hear your voice. I hung up before the emotion could rise too high. I stared through the windshield. The streetlight outside flickered once, then steadied. I remembered a moment when I was 10. Jason had broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. I took the blame because he begged me to. Said he'd get grounded during regionals. Mom believed him when he denied it. She patted his head and said I should be more careful. Dad just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. That same weight pressed into me now. History hadn't changed, only the scale of damage. I started the car again, wiped the fog from the inside of the windshield. I wasn't that 10-year-old anymore. I wasn't going to eat the consequences of someone else's arrogance. I wasn't going to be the shadow brother. Jason could have his steak dinners with Dad, his flashy suits, his empty charm. But I had something better now. I had purpose. I had proof, and the beginnings of a plan that would show them all just how dangerous I could be. When I stopped playing the good son. The rain slowed as I pulled onto I-35, the dark highway cutting through the woods. The wind moved against the car like a whisper. This time I would be the one writing the story, not them. And I knew exactly where to begin. The air inside the old Chase branch on Franklin Avenue still smelled like lemon cleaner and printer toner, a scent I hadn't realized I missed. I walked past the front desk head down, hoping the security cameras had been swapped since my time here. Most of the staff wouldn't recognize me anyway. It had been 3 years since I walked out those glass doors as a senior account manager, but Olivia Banks would. I spotted her at her desk typing something with a speed that hadn't changed since our training days. Her blonde hair was shorter now, sharper around the jawline. She glanced up, startled. "Ethan." "Hey, Liv." She stood up so quickly her rolling chair bumped the wall behind her. "What the hell, I thought you moved to Denver or something." I smiled, not ready to explain, just passing through. "Think you have a few minutes?" She looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly, then nodded. "Close the door." We sat. I didn't waste time. "I need you to check my name in the internal credit applications from the past 2 months, specifically anything filed by Jason Quinn or involving Quinn Crest Capital." Her brows knit together. "Your brother?" I nodded. Liv hesitated. "Ethan, you know I could get fired for this." "You could, but you won't. I'm not asking for a copy. Just look. Tell me yes or no." She stared at me a beat longer, then turned to her monitor. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. A few moments passed. "Well, damn, here's something. 2 weeks ago, $850,000 business credit line application. Jason filed it under Quinn Crest Holdings. Applicant name Ethan Quinn." I clenched my jaw. "Did it go through?" She clicked more. "Approved. Funds already drawn, several tranches." "Want to guess the recipient account?" "Let me guess. One of his shell LLCs." Her eyes widened slightly. "How did you know?" "Because this isn't the first time. Just the first time I'm ready." I leaned back, absorbing the weight of it. "He forged your authorization," Liv said, "but here's the part that makes me nervous. The system shows the form was signed digitally, with your email." "Which email?" She hesitated. "Ethan.quinn.personal@protonmail.com." I froze. That wasn't mine. It was an old backup Lena set up years ago, supposedly for managing our shared subscriptions. I hadn't checked it since before our wedding. I stood pacing slowly. "You okay?" Liv asked. "I'm fine. Just realizing how deep this goes." She typed more, pulling up attached files. "There's more. The application packet also included an address verification document. Utility bill. You want to guess the address? Our old townhouse on 48th. The one Lena and I lived in before selling it last year." "Correct. And guess whose name the bill was in Lena?" She nodded. It was subtle, but the timeline made it obvious. Jason had set this up months ago. He'd used Lena's old info, likely with her help. Whether she knew about the credit line or not, she was involved. "I need access to everything connected to that application. Dates, IP addresses, any backdoor activity." Liv bit her lip. "I'll try. No promises. This isn't just gray area, it's black, I know, but I need it." She glanced around, then reached for a notepad, scribbled a number, and slid it to me. "That's my personal cell. Use Signal if you contact me. And Ethan. Yeah. Whatever this is, be careful. Jason isn't subtle, but he is ruthless. I smiled without warmth. So am I. Now, I left the bank with a folder of screenshots she printed from the internal system and a growing storm inside my chest. My next stop was my phone provider. Within 30 minutes, every account password and trace of that old Proton mail was shut down. I canceled the last remaining credit card still tied to Lena's name. I requested new credentials for everything from health insurance to grocery delivery. I was scrubbing her out of my life one click at a time. But more importantly, I was sealing off every tunnel they thought they still had access to. That night, I poured myself a drink, something I hadn't done in months. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the email confirmation from Proton Mail. It listed one last login just 8 days ago from an IP address in Sacramento. Jason's condo was in Sacramento. I didn't need proof of the affair anymore. I had proof of something worse: conspiracy, fraud, wire abuse, and Lena had left fingerprints on all of it. I picked up my phone, stared at her name in my contacts, and finally deleted it. She no longer existed in my world. As I stared out into the night, the wind pressed against the window, rattling slightly, like it too knew that things had shifted. The silence felt good, but there was more work to do. Under the pale wash of a late October sky, I found myself in front of a small cafe on Maple and 7th, a place I hadn't stepped into in years. The chime above the door sounded the same, comforting and low like an old song. Diane Keller looked up from behind the counter and her face softened into something between concern and nostalgia. "Ethan Quinn," she said, wiping her hands on a towel as she walked out from behind the espresso machine. "You finally crawl out from whatever cave you've been hiding in." I gave her a tired smile and nodded toward the back. "Can I get a seat? And a black coffee?" She nodded, motioned to the quiet corner booth, and brought the coffee herself instead of having one of the teens behind the counter handle it. "You look like you haven't slept since Clinton was in office," she said, half joking, half checking. I raised the cup but said nothing. She sat down across from me anyway, so she started carefully. "I'm guessing you didn't just stop in to talk about old times." I watched her stir cream into her cup with a deliberate calm. "You saw Lena here recently," I said. "With Jason?" Her spoon stopped. "4 months ago," she said quietly. "They were sitting right here." She said it was a work thing, but they weren't talking like colleagues. Body language said otherwise. She looked at me now, really looked. "I didn't say anything then. I figured you knew I didn't know." She nodded, more to herself than to me. She didn't even look nervous, just comfortable, like it wasn't the first time they'd been out together. I closed my eyes for a beat. The air in the room felt stiller than it should have. "She used to bring me here on Sundays," I said quietly. "Back when we were trying to patch things up. I thought maybe if I just kept showing up, if I kept being steady, that it would be enough." Diane leaned in, her voice low. "Sometimes you love someone so hard you mistake fear for faith. Maybe you knew she wasn't changing. You just didn't want to start over again." I looked out the window. A couple walked past holding hands. I used to watch people like that and feel warmth. Now I only measured how long it might last. The night she came clean back in 20, I remembered every word. We sat in the kitchen, dim light from the fridge, the only thing keeping us from total darkness. She cried, said it meant nothing, that it was over, that she wanted to be better. I believed her because it was easier than admitting I wasn't enough. I opened my wallet and dropped a 20 on the table. "Thanks for the coffee," I said. "And the honesty. You okay?" No, I said, but I will be. I stepped out into the cold air. The leaves were just beginning to die in earnest, swirling across the sidewalk like they knew how short everything was. I walked without knowing where until I ended up downtown outside a boutique tech firm Jason had invested in last year. The building was glass and steel, new money dressed like innovation. I stood across the street behind a parked delivery truck and waited. It didn't take long. Jason came out just after 3, laughing into his phone. He looked healthy, relaxed. His coat was too expensive, his watch catching the afternoon light like a dare. A car pulled up, Lena in the passenger seat. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. He got in. The door shut. They drove away. I didn't follow. Not yet. I went home instead. Sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. 1 tab for Lena, 1 for Jason. Under each I listed what I knew. Dates, places, money, connections. I wasn't going to confront them, I was going to watch them. I opened a new email account, anonymous, set up alerts, subscribed to job boards where Jason's name might pop up, checked LinkedIn, monitored changes. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark and opened the folder I'd locked away years ago. Inside were the printouts of messages Lena had sent to Mark, the old affair, her promises, her lies. I had saved them all. At the time I thought it was weakness, now I saw it for what it was. Insurance. At 3 in the morning I emailed myself copies of everything. Then I put the originals in the shredder. Some ghosts don't deserve to live twice. As I watched the paper disappear into teeth, I felt the first flicker of clarity I'd had in days. In the morning, I would begin tracking Jason's finances. It wasn't revenge, it was prevention. Rain pattered against the window pane as I stepped into the lobby of Eldridge and Mason, a boutique legal firm tucked away in downtown Minneapolis. The brass nameplate gleamed faintly, and I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. I'd already locked away evidence, traced finances, torn out old ties. Now it was time to build something unbreakable. "Mr. Quinn," I said when the secretary looked up, "Attorney Eldridge is expecting you." She offered a veneer of calm professionalism, but I could see her curiosity. That was fine. Let them wonder. A door opened and Thomas Eldridge emerged from behind a frosted glass panel. He was in his mid-50s, salt hair, carefully combed back suit, well cut. Presence relentless. We shook hands. "Thank you for meeting me so quickly," I said. He nodded, ushering me into his office. Law journals lined the wall, degrees and accolades sprawled across the corner, but his eyes were plain, direct. "Let's begin," he said. I placed a folder on his desk. Everything was there: bank records, screenshots, IP logs, hit on shell companies, forged mail logs, lease agreements, no contact affidavits, the works. "I'm not looking for favors," I said quietly. "I need to know where all the footprints are, and I need to stop what's happening now." He flipped through pages. "Your brother used your identity to secure massive lines of credit, falsified signatures, misused Lena's data for address proofs. This is solid. We can initiate a civil suit while opening a formal investigation report with the county. Good," I said. He nodded. "I have contacts at the county sheriff's financial crimes unit. We should walk in tomorrow with documents to file. Then we prepare a civil complaint and draft protective orders. We move fast, we trap him in his own web." I exhaled. Until now, I've been on defense. Now I strike the first blow. He studied me. "Your vulnerability is your strength right now. Lean into it." I nodded. We spent the next hour building a timeline, plotting events, drafting emails to law enforcement. Then I felt a tap on the door and rose slightly. Lena's voice broke the hum of the office. "Ethan." "It's Lena." My grip on the folder tightened. I didn't say come in, but she opened the door anyway and stepped inside. her eyes red-rimmed cheeks, wet hair loose around her shoulders. "Ethan, I just came for my things." I stared at her. My voice was even. "Right. Your things." She crossed the room in a couple steps, leaning in until she was too close. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "I never thought you'd turn on me." I blinked at the layers there. Guilt, fear, fury. I wasn't ready to sort them in that moment. "Let me grab my bag," she said. She rummaged through my coat rack and pulled out a duffel bag. I pulled my phone and continued typing notes into a document detailing everything transferred wrongfully from my accounts. She paused, bag in hand, voice cracking. "I don't think I'm pregnant." I froze. She shook her head. "I thought I was. But I'm not. I said Jason told me you wouldn't let me come alone. You always protected me from the worst." My breath sped up. She was fishing for sympathy. Then she turned and spoke without knowing. "I just wanted to make you see me again, like you used to." That was when it hit me. She said his name, like Jason used to. She meant to say Ethan. My chest burned for an instant, then numbly fell calm. I didn't catch her as she left. I let the door close behind her. I sat back, trembling, rage, frigid, and concentrated. Thomas watched, knowing, but silent. "You recorded that," I said carefully. I nodded and the office clock ticked in the quiet. He stood and offered a hand. "We have everything now." I nodded. "It's time." I exhaled so slowly I barely noticed. Then I closed the notebook, turned off my phone, and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The strategy was clear, and now there was no turning back. The knock on the door came just after lunch. It was sharp and deliberate, not the kind of knock you hear when someone's lost or polite. It was the one you hear when someone thinks they already own what's behind it. I'd expected it eventually, but not today. I opened the door to two officers standing in the hallway. The taller one, a woman with dark eyes, introduced herself calmly. "Detective Rosa Hill from Hennepin County, Minnehaha Precinct." The male officer, burly and unblinking, stayed behind her. "May we come in?" she asked. I stiffened, then stepped aside. "Of course. Coffee's brewing if you want some," I said quietly. She declined. The other officer nodded once, their uniforms crisp. I led them into the living room, past the boxes of what used to be mine, now wrapped in plastic. "Detective Hill, I'm sorry to bother you, but I received a report alleging domestic violence." I nodded like I already knew. I kept my voice calm. No sign of alarm. "Yes, I know." She sat on the edge of the couch, reached into her satchel, and slid a portable recorder across the coffee table. "Would you like to make a statement?" I gathered my thoughts. "I'd like you to listen to this first." I pressed play. Lena's voice trembled. "Ethan, please, I'm scared. I feel faint." Then a sob. "Then I love you. Forgive me, please." Then she called softly. "Jason, please help me." She froze herself. I clicked stop. "Whatever this is, it's on record." Detective Hill's eyes flickered. "What happened today?" "Lena came to collect some belongings," she said. Innocent voice. "From me?" "Yes," I nodded. "Was there an argument?" "I don't shout. I don't yell." I locked the door when it became clear this was another set piece, so she couldn't claim access. She cried, said she was pregnant, said Jason was going to hurt her if I didn't cooperate. But she said the wrong name, Jason. I heard myself exhale. Detective Hill cleared her throat. "I don't doubt you provided a safe place, but right now there isn't enough here for criminal charges. But we'll have this on record." The detective folded her hands. "Lena will need to stay with someone else tonight for safety." I nodded. I want to make sure she leaves peacefully in 24 hours. That's all I'm looking for. She paused, eyes steady. That's reasonable. Then she turned to her partner and signed a form. We'll ask around quietly to ensure no further conflicts. If anything else happens, you let us know. I will. Thank you. They rose and I walked them to the door. I closed it quietly behind them. I stood there for a moment, feeling the echo of their presence drain away. Lena's sobs echoed from the guest room even before I opened the door. I knocked lightly. Lena, I need you to pack now. She poked her head out. Pack, I said. Into the bag I left by the couch. She blinked. She said nothing and I waited. A small bag slung over her shoulder later, she gave the empty look of someone who once believed guilt was permission. I stood by the door. It's time. She nodded once and slipped past me. I locked the door when she left and found the recorder on the couch. I pressed play again, letting her words hang in the silence I inhabited. In 24 hours, this building won't have to pretend to be safe again. I turned out the light and stood in the dark, listening to the sound of my breathing steady in the quiet. There were conditions now, and lines drawn. The investigation was my shield, and in that moment I realized for the first time in a long time I wasn't just surviving. I was defending the truth. It felt oddly peaceful. Rain had faded and the night smelled of wet pavement as I walked back into the house. Locked doors and silence greeted me, but I knew they couldn't protect me entirely. Not while Jason still thought he could play me for a fool. I called Olivia. She answered quickly, her voice cautious. Any updates, she asked. Yes, I said. Let's meet tomorrow evening at the office. She agreed. The next afternoon, I found myself seated across from Olivia at her glass-walled desk at the bank headquarters. Her gaze was steady, professional. I placed a manila folder between us. Inside were documents from the loan application, the Shell LLC's email headers. Olivia scrolled. This confirms it, she said. The startup loan application filed under your information lists Quinn Innovations Group as the beneficiary. So my identity vouched for his startup. He thought being tangible Quinn would open doors no one would question. She nodded. We reviewed transaction logs. Money moved quickly, disbursements to Quinn Innovations, then transfers to opaque accounts, and finally a large sum, nearly $20,000, sent to a savings account under Lena's maiden name. I pressed my thumb to temple, the weight of betrayal sinking in. She showed me internal emails between the loan officer and a finance manager. They discussed the urgency of the loan, time-sensitive executive investment, but something felt off. The wording was too eager, and one email mentioned confirming signatures via email, not wet ink. Olivia looked at me. This is financial misrepresentation. You have enough for both criminal and civil paths if you choose to pursue. I nodded. Gather everything we have. We'll graph the transactions and map the flow. This isn't just deception. This is theft. I closed the folder slowly. I left her office and drove back to my condo. My mind was spinning. In the guest room, I pulled out the flash drive labeled Evidences. I plugged it in and watched the files populate my screen: emails, PDFs, logs. I created 2 folders, one for state investigators, one for my attorney. Then I opened Lena's dark world by mistake. A folder marked Personal Finance. In it, dozens of screenshots of online transfer confirmations. Small amounts, $500 here, $2,500 there, dated weeks after the startup loan came through. Lena was getting money, not from me, from him. I printed the transactions. I could barely catch my breath. Later that evening, I visited my attorney's office again. Thomas looked at the documents, brows knit. She was complicit, I said quietly. Thomas pressed his lip. Complicit or silent co-conspirator. Either way, she's implicated deeply. He sat back. Then we expand the complaint, not just loan fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit financial theft. It broadens the coverage and threatens their legal shield. It felt heavy, terrifying even to bring these charges. But I closed the gap. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the condo. The city lights were muted and far away. I stacked evidence folder after folder. At 3 a.m. I emailed critical attachments to a trusted investigator at the county attorney's office, using a secure line. No return address. I exhaled. It was done. I sat in darkness, the weight of consequences pressing against me, knowing tomorrow they'd need more than just faith to convict them. I whispered to the night air. Now they'll see everything. Then I turned off the light and waited for the dawn. I woke with sunlight spilling across the living room floor. The city felt too quiet this morning, like everyone was holding their breath. I poured coffee in the dark and checked my phone. A message from Dad flickered on screen. Proud of you. Don't stop. I stared at the words, blinked, then went to my desk and opened my email. I forwarded key documents to the Minnesota Department of Revenue and the private law firm representing a major investor in Jason's startup, Avadia Capital. Their interest was tied to a multi-million-dollar Series A round. Seeing my name linked with his deception would break that chain. Minutes later, I pulled up the county courthouse website to check if a hearing had been scheduled. It wasn't visible yet, but an alert confirmed formal review. Both Jason and Lena were now subjects of investigation. That information came from Thomas. They'd filed a criminal complaint, not just civil filings. 4 hours later, I stood in the ornate courtroom lobby, flanked by wooden columns and muted daylight filtering through high windows. Jason was there, tightly pressed by a pair of lawyers, his expression taut. I didn't meet his eyes. I was just an observer now. Minutes later, the judge called the hearing to order. A county prosecutor read a brief statement citing financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The courtroom felt suspended as the reality settled. This wasn't theory anymore. Jason's empire was collapsing in real time. Lena sat in the back. Her eyes were red. She looked empty. When she caught my glance, she looked away sharply. My mother arrived soon after, trailing in a rough wool coat. She found Lena and whispered consoling words. At one point, she looked at me and then down at her shoes. I saw her, the loyalty battle inside her. It was painful, but I felt nothing but resolve. Thomas was brief and efficient. He gave me a nod, like we both knew where this was headed. The prosecutor didn't ask me to speak, but the folder in my hands contained everything. Bank transfers, email, headers, loan docs. It was comprehensive. After the judge adjourned, people filed out. I didn't linger. Outside, I drove home in silence. The house felt larger, the walls echoing with quiet aftershock. Lena wasn't home. Mom called to check in. Her voice trembled. "You're doing what you have to do," she said. I absorbed the words. This wasn't an act of vengeance. It was an act of survival. I didn't say more. The next ping came from my phone. It was Dad again. "Your voice mattered. Thank you." I clutched the phone in my hand. His faith felt like armor, or maybe like a mirror. For once, I didn't feel guilty for living. I walked into my study and sat at my desk. I organized files, highlighted key points, filed paperwork electronically. It was methodical, purposeful. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing. That evening, I watched the evening news. The anchor reported on growing scrutiny of financial crimes in Minnesota, citing recent funding increases for prosecutors in the state public defender's office to tackle complex cases. It struck me they were improving the system I was using. Jason would soon find himself outmatched, not just by me, but by a system getting smarter, stronger. I switched off the TV. Darkness returned, but I didn't mind. It was the pause before proof became prosecution. There was momentum now. Quiet, relentless momentum building in the night. And I was steering it. A sudden vibration in my pocket broke the silence. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Jason. I didn't recognize his urgency anymore. I blocked his number permanently. The world started to feel smaller the moment his calls stopped lighting the screen. Hours later, I opened my inbox to a long email from Lena. "You were right," she wrote. "I'm sorry. I never stopped loving you." I read it twice and then deleted it. No space for old grief, no room for reconciliation. Diane texted next. "Lena moved out of town. Said goodbye, take care." It hit me that everything had shifted. Quietly, not with fanfare, but fundamentally. I braced myself for the blow. It came fast. A company bulletin: Jason Quinn placed on administrative leave. Quinn Innovations Group's board cited ongoing investigations affecting his leadership. His emails redirected. Investors publicly stepped back. I watched the words on screen like a hurricane unfolding in code. I didn't celebrate. I finished my coffee in the dim light of the cafe across from the park. Something about watching the world go on while the man who broke everything watches his empire crumble makes you feel numb in the edges. But legal feathers don't ruffle easily. I knew I had to hit harder at the right time. Later that afternoon, I sat in my lawyer's office. Thomas's gaze met mine steady. Jason tried to call his lead investor, Rovent Capital's general counsel, hoping to delay hearings, freeze proceedings. They declined, citing Clause 173 in the investor agreement. No stay granted. The invitation to testify stands. He leaned forward. "They're falling fast," I nodded. "It's not over until the last stone falls." That evening, I drove to Lake Harriet. I needed space. I parked on the walking path and got out. A cool breeze ruffled the cottonwood leaves overhead. Families watched, ducks, joggers moved past. Normal life. I remembered our wedding morning, October 2019. At the Creekside Chapel near here. Lena, an ivory sun in her hair, vows thick with promise. I remembered standing alone afterward on those wooden stairs, feeling like I'd never love again. Yet I still believed. Now I stood here feeling more clear than I had in years. Jason's phone call unanswered. Lena gone. The startup hanging by a thread. But I was still here. I had every shred of truth on my side. I exhaled slowly. The wind brushed across the lake like a reminder that peace could exist in stillness after the storm. I turned and walked back to my car. The wires of my plan were humming, gathering tension, and I knew the next move had to deliver finality. Sunlight warmed my skin when I finally stepped onto the porch of my new home in Brookings, Oregon. I slipped the key into the deadbolt and heard the familiar click of closure. After 3 months, everything had been resolved. No prison time for them, but reputations shattered and opportunities evaporated like mist over the sea. I had sold the house in Minneapolis a few weeks ago and relocated here quietly. In this coastal town, waves crash more honesty than most people ever speak. I'd signed the lease on a small building 2 blocks from the beach and turned it into a bookstore, the Quiet Shelf. It was perfect books in sand and a life judged by whisper, not by scandal. Inside, I shelved first editions of Whitman and Monroe's transcendental essays mixed with modern stories about justice and healing. I'd added one shelf just for local authors writing about forgiveness and rebirth. That shelf was the only spark of ambition I kept, a living reminder of what I chose for myself. My first customers trickled in an 80-year-old couple who wanted a volume of Yeats, a teenage poet hoping to hide between lines someone who smelled like rain and borrowed a local history book. They didn't know what had happened, and I liked it that way. I helped with gentle suggestions, quiet smiles, reminding them reading mattered more than drama. One afternoon, an elderly woman came in with a tattered paperback about broken families. She hesitated at the standalone shelf and looked at me. Her eyes questioned. Looking for something specific, she asked. I pointed at the paperback. "That one helps when your trust turned out to be a trap," I said softly. She nodded and put it under her arm. When she turned to leave, she smiled. "Thank you for letting me take hope from these pages." I smiled back and said, "Take all you need." After she left, I sat behind the counter and traced the grain of the wood. 3 months earlier, I had sent copies of my case files, clean redacted, to my attorney and to the press. The case had run its course. No jail, but a public apology from Jason, a letter of retraction from Lena, a financial settlement that ensured I was indemnified. It wasn't cathartic in sound or sight, but it was enough. I'd grown enough that I didn't need more. I rang the shop bell later that day when a man about my age stepped in. He asked for recommendations about starting over. I didn't ask him to elaborate. I pulled down a battered edition of the Odyssey and handed it to him. "Start anywhere," I told him gently, and walked back to turn the page of a waiting book. That night I sat on the balcony watching stars over the Pacific. The smell of salt and juniper in the breeze. Memories of storms past flickered in my mind, but by now the land had washed them smooth. I whispered to the sky I chose me. And in that moment it was enough. I watched the faltering light over the Pacific from the back of my new bookstore as the phone buzzed. My attorney's name flashed. The message was brief: work completed. All liens removed. Jason officially bankrupt. I exhaled. It was final. I had files neatly archived, notifications from the Department of Revenue, closing documents, correspondence, confirming that any liability once hanging over me had been extinguished. It wasn't about vindication. It was about clarity. That afternoon, an envelope arrived through the mail. Cream-colored, slightly expensive paper with a familiar handwriting I had erased from my life. Inside was a handwritten letter. I unfolded it and learned that Jason was apologizing. He wrote that I had won, that he was sorry. It ended simply: "Your victory isn't mine, but you deserve it." I held it in my hands for a long time. Then I stepped outside toward the shoreline just a block away. The wind tugged at the pages as I lit the letter with a match. I held the flame to each word until the letter curled and began to burn. The ash drifted down like silent confessions. I knelt at the water's edge and released the charred remains. Waves lapped and carried them out into the expanding horizon. There was something beautiful in watching final pieces disappear. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. Later that evening, I sat behind the counter at the quiet shelf, the ocean breeze drifting in as quiet as the labels I placed on the shelves. I closed my eyes as I heard a customer murmur to themselves about trust and healing. Then speak up. "You have no idea how much that fits me right now." I opened my eyes. The shop was full of soft light and quiet knowledge, and I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't out for revenge. I'd just closed a chapter at the right moment. It was their end, and mine had only just begun. If you've ever chosen quiet strength over loud vengeance, you understand that sometimes moving on is the greatest victory of all.